Welcome to Rudy Giuliani's Common Sense. And we have as a guest Miranda Devine, the author of the now famous, infamous, world infamous Hard Drive from Hell. And really someone who's had the courage to look into something where very, very few people fear. Most people are afraid to thread or talk about it or look at it. And I want to ask her a few questions about how far this has gone. First of all, an awful lot of revelations have now taken place of the different crimes allegedly revealed by the hard drive. So some simple, some complex. The possession of the .38 revolver by a drug addict is a fairly simple, straightforward crime that would be prosecuted in 2 days in most U.S. attorney's office. Also, he lied, which would be an extra felony that would be added to it. The whole situation with China would be very complicated. There are transactions, and you tell us, the transactions with China that you can trace on the hard drive with, let's say, the Biden family in general. Approximately when do they start? And then they go right up to the time he becomes president. But how far back do they go?
Well, I mean, Hunter Biden, I think it was around 2013 that he first started making trips to China. And remember, Joe Biden took him famously on Air Force Two when Joe Biden had been tasked with the job of managing China's new aggressiveness against America and against the world. What did Joe Biden do? He took his son Hunter into Beijing for those high-level meetings with Chinese Communist Party officials, including Xi Jinping. And Joe Biden walked away from that meeting empty-handed. He was supposed to be stopping China from militarizing those islands in the South China Sea, stop China from stealing our intellectual property, and effectively stop their aggressive expansionism. And he failed on all those accounts, but Hunter Biden did not fail. He walked away from that meeting where he was understood by the Chinese leadership to be a princeling, as in the family member who gets the bribe, not the official. You don't pay the official, you pay the bribe to the family member. So it was pretty obvious to Chinese eyes what Hunter Biden was doing there, even if it was baffling to Americans. And even if the media at the time accepted Joe Biden's usual line, which was he's just a great family man and he likes to travel with his family. So Hunter Biden walked away from that meeting with a 10% cut of a equity firm, Chinese equity firm in partnership with the Bank of China called BHR, which had several tens of billions of dollars in funds under management. So it was a good deal for Hunter Biden. And then, of course, after that, from 2015 on to 2018, 2017, Hunter Biden, Jim Biden, and their partners were doing work for CEFC, which was a front. It was a Chinese energy conglomerate, but really a front for the military intelligence. It was the capitalist arm of President Xi's Belt and Road Initiative. They were doing work around the world, in the Middle East, in Africa, and so on, to open doors using Joe Biden, the vice president's name, while he was vice president the last 2 years while he was in office, and to make lots of money for themselves. Tens of millions of dollars then flowed into their bank accounts as a result. And we know that CEFC, that joint venture partnership, that Joe Biden was going to get a 10% cut of it when that joint venture partnership was actually formalized after he stepped down, because of course they weren't going to formalize the relationship, they weren't going to accept money until he was safely clear of office. But within a month or two, Hunter's there saying, you owe us $20 million, my family, because of all the work we've done for you the last 2 years. And Tony Bobulinski told us, of course, that Joe Biden was the big guy who was getting a 10% cut.
That is a document that's in the hard drive, and it's a handwritten, clear for anyone to see. 10% for the big guy, Now, CFC is really a creature of the Chinese Communist Party, as is really the Bank of China.
Yeah.
So in essence, the vice president's son, going back to 2015 or so, is in business with the Chinese Communist Party, their entities, while Joe Biden is negotiating, presumably against them, to force them or push them to do things they don't want to do, pull back in the islands, reduce tariffs, deal with human rights. This is never raised as a conflict by anyone, anywhere, at any time. I mean, it's a headline grabbing conflict.
Well, look, we know that the FBI someone there was concerned about it because, and they knew about it because Patrick Ho, one of the CEFC executives who was arrested at JFK on bribery charges in late 2017, November 2017. Now, he was a close associate of Hunter Biden. He paid Hunter $1 million in a legal retainer just for just such a circumstance that they predicted might happen. And of course, the first phone call that Patrick Ho made when he was arrested was to Jim Biden, because he couldn't get hold of Hunter. And Jim said, "Oh, you don't want to talk to me." When he was asked about it, he said that he told the New York Times that he put Patrick Ho onto his nephew Hunter. And so we know that the FBI was eavesdropping. They'd had FISA warrants out for Patrick Ho and other people in CFC that Hunter was associating with. So they would have picked up any communications that Hunter had with those CFC people, whether it was Chairman Yi or Director Zhang or Patrick Ho, all of whom you know very well, Rudy, because their names and communications with them are littered throughout the laptop. So the FBI knew what Hunter was up to. And another clue about the FBI's surveillance of Hunter was when, in that incident with the trash can, where Hallie Biden, Hunter's lover, former sister-in-law, found his new gun she found it somewhere, I think, in his car. And she was worried about it, and she drove to the local shopping centre and she put it in a trash can. And a vagrant came along and took it out pretty quickly. But when Hunter found out what Hallie had done, he was furious and he sent her back to the trash can to retrieve it. She couldn't find it. The cops, the local Delaware police were called. But who showed up in record time? The FBI, because they were surveilling Hunter at the time.
And didn't the Secret Service show up and also ask the merchant for the papers regarding Hunter's acquisition of the gun?
Yes, although that's what the gun shop owner says. He says that two men who identified themselves as Secret Service agents showed up immediately and asked for the papers, the background check that Hunter had lied on, to do with the gun, and he refused, quite rightly. But the Secret Service has denied that those were their agents.
Right, and the Secret Service also, just to give it a little bit more credibility, is also allegedly involved, although they denied it, in a situation where Joe Biden won't come out of his room. Hunter Biden won't come out of his room. He either has to pay money back to his father, or his father has to pay money back to him. There's some situation where the father wants some money out of him. The Secret Service shows up and forces him out of the room. And I believe they deny that as well.
Yeah, although those two Secret Service agents were retired, one only very recently, in a matter of weeks earlier, and the other one had been on Joe Biden's vice presidential detail, and he'd retired sometime before. But he was very loyal. This is Dale Papillo, very loyal to the Biden family. Joe and Jill Biden showed up at his father's funeral in the Midwest on Air Force Two. And that was sort of typical of Joe Biden, that he would win the loyalty of people by making those sorts of gestures, people who were useful to him. And Del Pipillo was useful to him and continued to do some work for Jim and Hunter Biden. Like there's evidence on the laptop that he was doing kind of due diligence on their partners, potential partners, people like Tony Bobulinski, and as usual, they stiffed him on the bill. There's a bill there for a few $1,000s that he wanted paid that was very overdue, and there's some emails between Jim and Hunter sort of talking about who should pay it and whether it should be paid, etc.
So the FBI, and therefore the Department of Justice, by the time we get to the beginning of the election year, 2020, but before Joe Biden is a candidate, have the hard drive. They also have.
They have the laptop. They have the laptop.
They have the laptop, the hard drive, and the laptop.
Gave them the actual laptop, Hunter Biden's laptop, in December 2019, and they also had a copy of the hard drive. He had uploaded the entire contents of the laptop onto his server, which he had to do to try and repair it. And that's how he came to give you a complete clone of the laptop on a hard drive.
But the point that I'm making is the FBI had it before Joe Biden was really actively running for president, not within that 2-month period right before the election where there's no rule, but a general understanding you don't open an investigation. And apparently did nothing, or if they did do something, it's unknown, to investigate it.
Yeah, they did nothing. And, Joe Biden announced that he was the candidate for president in April of 2019, just a couple of weeks after Hunter abandoned his laptop at that repair shop in Delaware. December 2019, John Paul MacIsaac, the owner of the computer repair shop, handed the laptop to the FBI. They seem to have done nothing. The impeachment went ahead when there was a lot of evidence on the laptop that would have been beneficial to Donald Trump. And that was why John Paul MacIsaac was so exercised about the fact that he saw that the FBI had the material and were doing nothing with it. And that was why, as you know, he looked for other people to contact. And then in October of 2020, after you had given us the copy of the hard drive at the New York Post, and our first story had come out, after that, Tony Bobulinski came out publicly and held a press conference. And then he had a several hours interview with the FBI in which he corroborated all the material that you had found on the laptop. There's a lot of duplication between his material on his devices, the documents, the WhatsApp messages, and so on that he handed to the FBI at that point. There's a lot of duplication, corroboration, mirroring of what's on the laptop. So they now had double confirmation that the Biden family was engaged in this, really nefarious influence peddling scheme that involved China and Russia and Ukraine. And yet again, nothing happened. Now, we know that the FBI had an investigation into Hunter Biden. We know that the US attorney in Delaware has been running his investigation since 2018. But what is the holdup? Why are they so slow? They haven't actually called in, I believe, Tony Bobulinski to that Delaware grand jury to testify. But other people who have testified, they have called in some of Hunter's other former business partners and some of his ex-lovers, presumably to look at tax issues. And it's just curious. They at least one of those witnesses was asked, who is the big guy? Which means that the grand jury is at least asking questions that may lead to Joe Biden. But a good question that some former intelligence officials have said to me that Chuck Grassley and the Oversight Committee, the Republicans there, should be asking Christopher Wray when he shows up to Congress on Thursday is, Did you give a defensive briefing to Hunter Biden, Jim Biden, and Joe Biden about particularly CEFC, this front for Chinese military intelligence? And if not, why not?
Sure. And did he brief Attorney General Barr? In other words, during the impeachment proceeding, was Barr aware of the fact that this computer hard drive existed that contained exculpatory evidence that would have been enormously helpful, let's say, to me as his lawyer, in defending him against a charge that the conversation with Zelensky was totally unjustified, because the hard drive gives you 50 justifications for the conversation. And if there were a criminal trial, that would be a violation of a very serious Brady rule, and they'd both be held in contempt. I mean, the government possessed information that made the impeachment unnecessary. The FBI certainly knew about it. Did Barr know about it? Did Gray go ahead and explain it to Barr or withhold it from him? Now Barr seems to have changed his mind about whether a special prosecutor is necessary. And now he thinks a special prosecutor is necessary. But was he in possession of this information before? I don't think we have any clue about that.
No, it's a really good question. And I mean, look, my impression of Barr's time as Attorney General is that he was kept in the dark quite a bit about what was going on. I mean, you probably know better than I do, but Jeffrey Berman, did he tell Bill Barr that he was spying on your cloud?
I don't think so. Or did Jeffrey Berman tell him that in 2018, Ukrainians came to him offering him this entire scheme, and he turned them down, saying he was too busy investigating Russian collusion? I mean, did he tell him that? Or was Barr ever briefed? Attorney General Barr asked me to turn my information over to the U.S. Attorney in Pittsburgh. In early 2020, a very snowy day, I'll remember it forever, I spent the weekend with Bob Costello pulling my records together. I created an outline that big, and I went into the U.S. Attorney's office in Pittsburgh, and I met with the U.S. Attorney in Pittsburgh, assistant U.S. attorneys, and FBI agents, about 9 of them. And I spent 4.5 hours with briefings and charts and took them through the whole case. It was, without boring you with the details, it was a flat-out racketeering case against the Biden crime family, including the 8 witnesses they could interview and the 20 or 30 corroborating documents, including a $3.1 million money laundering situation that could be proved on paper. They were very excited about it. Most important.
So what happened to that?
Well, first thing they did was they wanted to interview my informant, the person who brought it to me. He was willing to do it, and they interviewed him. And Bob and I were very excited that finally, after we could get no one to investigate this, including I might add Secretary of State Pompeo, to whom I gave the same material in March of 2019, and they buried it. He was going to have the Secretary of State was going to have the State Department criminal investigators investigate it. They were going to call me. They were going to ask for information. Called back twice, and they had no interest. Well, they interviewed the informant. I think established his bona fides because he had a history, a very good history, I might add, of helping the United States government, American citizen, but with great ties in both Ukraine, really Ukraine more than Russia. They asked us for some additional information. There was a woman that we were aware of that was at risk, afraid she was going to be killed, and wanted to be in the witness protection program. We had given them that information. They were moving on that. She allegedly had some of the offshore bank accounts that Burisma used, not only for the Bidens, but for the former other government officials they had from Germany and England. It was all at the same bank in different boxes. and she could describe it in detail. And she was the wife of the former owner. And we had arranged for her to be picked up. And all of a sudden, it just stopped. They wouldn't call us back. We never heard from them again. When Bob would call the U.S. Attorney's Office, they would say we were working on it. The woman eventually disappeared. She ran away. We hope she's still alive. And this was at the request of Attorney General Barr, because he didn't want to investigate it himself. He would give it to individual U.S. attorneys, like he gave the Hunter Biden investigation to the one in Delaware. This was to the one in Pittsburgh. But they were fully aware of at least 8 or 10 witnesses that had direct evidence of Joe Biden's involvement in bribery and were willing to testify to it under oath, which is quite powerful. Now, did some of them have credibility problems? I never prosecuted a case where my witnesses didn't have credibility problems. Were they corroborated by the hard drive? 100%. So I don't know. I have no explanation for this other than at the very top, we have a very corrupt FBI. And something has to be done about that for the good of the country beyond the Bidens, the Trumps, the anybody else's. And we have a serious national security problem. I mean, you can get out of all the criminal stuff here and step back and say, how can we be sure that Joe Biden is making judgments about China in the best interest of the United States and not in the best interest of a country that paid him more money than America?
Yeah. And look, I know that the Republicans are all geared up to very aggressively prosecute this case in hearings, whether it be the Oversight Committee or the Judiciary, after the midterms, if, as expected, they take back the House at least. But my concern is that, there's so much talk about Joe Biden not finishing his term. And will the Republicans continue to prosecute that case, which I think is very important from, as you say, a national security issue, to see what the FBI covered up, who covered it up, what is rotten inside the FBI? For one, the intelligence community as well, and also just the extent of Chinese Communist Party infiltration at the very top of our government. And unfortunately, I'm told, not by Republicans, but by others, that if Joe Biden is no longer there, that they will just drop off that investigation.
I mean, that's been done before. I mean, it is on much less serious matters, but a common deal with a public official is he resigns, either doesn't get charged or gets a minor charge, and then you forget about the whole thing. Okay, it's history. The problem here is that Chinese infiltration might just be the tip of the iceberg, and an indication as to the rest of the infiltration they have into our government, Oh, it sure is. Yeah. I hope I don't give the impression that it's only Democrats that commit crimes. Republicans are just as prone to the temptation, unfortunately. And your work, as you know, I cannot say enough about it. You're a very courageous woman, Miranda. You're a great reporter, not just a good one. And if you get a Pulitzer Prize, is that the prize you get for your kind of work? Give it back. Tell him.
I won't get it. And I would give it back. And Rudy, none of
invite me to the ceremony, though. Invite me to the ceremony. I want you to get up there and do. I don't want you to hit anybody or do like somebody else did. But
it's not going to happen.
Something like shove it or something like that.
But Rudy, none of our reporting at the Post would have happened without you. So thank you for bringing it to us. And
thank you for doing it.
Power to you.
It's impossible for me to think that you're the only ones who would do it in the America I grew up in. Among other things, Miranda, even if you're, it's a great story. I mean, it's one of the great stories of the century.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I'm just a journalist. That's what I'm meant to do.
Yeah,
it's a great story. And if it was a Republican, I still would have done it. It's a great story.
Of course. And if it was a Republican, I still would have given it to you, believe it or not.
Exactly. Of course. Well, because it's about America. It's about the...
Correct. This is not a small thing you can overlook. Well, it's still moving along. We're not at the end of this. And again, congratulations, and be very careful and keep digging. You keep finding new things. I'm amazed.
Amazing, isn't it?
God bless you. God bless America. Welcome back to Rudy's Common Sense. I thought that was a very, very illuminating interview with a great investigative reporter, a great writer, and just an exceptionally courageous human being who has really, really dug into this. And it is true there is so much there, but it really takes a great deal of skill to find it, because this is a very dense document with millions and millions, if not more, bits of information that have to be tied together. And having put the first group together, I can tell you how difficult a job it is. And she and some others have done really an excellent work with it. But the real question is now, what are we going to do with it to cure the massive problem that this illustrates that we have in the United States of America? Sure, there's the most obvious things that come along with this. The most obvious things are the criminal cases that way back, was it a year ago, 2 years ago, in my early podcasts, they'd be mostly in podcasts 1 through 10, and then updates moving along. I outlined to you the criminal cases that existed with regard to Ukraine. The most prominent of which is the Zlochevsky bribe to Biden in order to fix the Burisma case, in which Zlochevsky paid Biden through Hunter and Archer $83,000 a month, or a couple million a year. The most obvious we would have would be the Ukraine cases, where right out of the almost easily obtained from the hard drive, it's the one that Mac Isaacs saw that really had him realize exactly how criminal the Bidens were, was all the contact with Ukraine when Joe Biden was saying he had no knowledge and no involvement with any of the foreign business of his brother, his son, or anyone. And of course, there's a significant amount of foreign involvement of Joe Biden, meeting with the number 2 person at Burisma, meeting with people from Burisma, playing golf with them, meeting with others from China, I believe from Romania, from the idea that he didn't meet with or know the foreign clients of his son is a provable lie with incredibly multiple levels of evidence. That would be such a ridiculous thing at a trial that I think he would have to stipulate to the fact that he met with many foreign clients of Hunter Biden, or you'd spent 2 weeks putting the people on there who met him. I mean, it was as big a lie as he graduated first in his class, or he had, 10 degrees, or whatever other plagiarism or lies he's done throughout his life. But that Ukraine thing would be a separate case in and of itself of straight out bribery at the highest levels of government, involving the vice president of the United States and the then president of the Ukraine, well known as a major corrupt person, probably considered to be the most corrupt. He and Zlochevsky, the 2 most corrupt people in Ukraine that Joe Biden was dealing with. Joe Biden had his son working with the most corrupt businessman in Ukraine, and they were bribing the most corrupt political figure, Poroshenko. And there are documents, witnesses, hard drive evidence, and people who are willing to come here and testify and have been held back by the FBI and threatened. And one woman who was very ready to do it and was in fear of her life, and she's now disappeared. One of the main witnesses was poisoned at one point because of the FBI's delay. Why the delay? Has to be corruption within the FBI. How much of it did Barr know? That's a question for a grand jury. Not for me. How much did the head of the FBI know? Well, he knew it all. What did he do about it? Apparently covered it up. We didn't get the chance to bring up with Miranda. There are now anywhere from, I don't know, I see the numbers, maybe as many as 11 whistleblowers from the FBI willing to testify that the FBI has been engaged in this cover-up now for quite some time, specifically to cover up the criminality of the Bidens so that it wouldn't prevent them from getting elected. I'm sure if you dig hard enough, there are whistleblowers about how the Hillary Clinton case was fixed as well, because that's where the corruption really begins, with the Clintons and the fixing of that case, which was a knockdown, easy criminal conviction and criminal case that Comey fixed. And from then on, the FBI at the top has been nothing more than a criminal organization. When you look at the evidence that it has and the evidence that it's withholding, you also could go on and you could take a look at the Hunter and Joe Biden money laundering case involving Ukraine, Latvia, Cyprus, eventually the United States. You've got it on paper. It's easy to prove. Could do it in a 3-day trial. Or you could still try to find that witness that was threatened with death and have her locate the foreign offshore bank accounts, which the FBI apparently had no interest in, nor did the Treasury Department. You could take a look at the Iraq deal, where James Biden got a large portion of a $1.5 billion housing contract. And Joe was the point man there, and Joe failed in his mission for the U.S., which was to get us a status of forces agreement in Iraq so we could protect our people there. But as is a theme of the Bidens, protection of American life means nothing to them. He did not achieve a protection of Americans. He failed with the Iraq government, but his brother and the family came away with a deal that could easily have netted millions and millions of dollars for them. Just like with China, he went over there to negotiate for China to back off the islands, to lower the tariffs, to loosen up on human rights. He failed in every respect, and the newspapers so reported at the time. And his son and his son's partner, Devin Archer, and Whitey Bulger's nephew, walked away with a big chunk of a private equity fund in which China, communist China, was their partner. That lasted for many years. And it's still unclear as to whether Hunter has connections with some of those entities. Those entities entered into investments that were against the interests of the United States, by the way. They entered into investments that had to do with the defense business. They entered into investments that had to do with arms. They entered into investments that had to do with things that would be detrimental to our country that his father was the vice president of. None of that's been explored. And then we go on and we ultimately end up, without going into detail, with a documented 31 million from China, 3.2 million from Russia, anywhere from 8 to 14 million from Ukraine, money from also Kazakhstan, Romania, and Iraq, I believe. And that's just what I can glean from the hard drive. Probably 2 years ago, I first put this case together. This is what I presented to the FBI in January of 2020 when I traveled to Pittsburgh for the 4 or 5 hour briefing, about which they were very excited, and where I had 6 witnesses on call ready to come from Ukraine and elsewhere to testify, and a 7th witness who was under threat of death, who they would have to have protected, who claimed to have the numbers of the Biden offshore bank accounts. But this was just a sort of a briefing on who the main defendants would be. This is the point man payout Biden crime family. Now, why do I call it point man payout Biden crime family? It should be payoff, really. I call it that because at least this there's a lot more money they got, but this sort of connects to an interesting thing you could put a RICO case together with. A RICO case is merely proving that people are in the business of crime. They don't just commit a crime, like a bribe, a single bribe, or two or three as part of a conspiracy. They literally have an ongoing business in which they each have roles, and over a period of time, usually not always, it's a lengthy period of time, the mafia from the 1930s, or the Teamsters Union was a RICO enterprise, or several of the investment banks who were engaged in massive fraudulent behavior were racketeering enterprises. New York City, under Ed Koch, had a racketeering enterprise, the Parking Violations Bureau, that took in millions of dollars worth of bribes that I prosecuted. But here you would have, I would call this the Biden crime family point man racketeering cases, because every time that Joe Biden was appointed by Obama as point man, a very unfortunate designation, it always resulted in two contradictory results. Biden would fail in his objectives for America, and the Biden family would get millions of dollars. Yes, Biden was sent to Iraq to negotiate status of forces agreement so American soldiers could remain behind and protect Americans and those who protected America. Biden failed. People died as a result of that. But James, who you see here, got a big piece of a $1.5 billion housing contract with no experience in housing, much like we now go to Ukraine, where he's appointed as point man to direct money to a then bankrupt Ukraine, desperate for that money, and to reduce, very, very ironically, the corruption in Ukraine. He fails in both aspects. He was supposed to also assist them with Russia, and he does nothing with Russia. In fact, until Trump comes in, they don't even give Ukraine a gun. The head of Ukraine told me they were giving pea shooters to fight off the Russians by Obama. And he was a friend of Biden's, by the way. Imagine if he wasn't a friend, what he would have said. So Biden fails in his mission. He certainly fails in reducing corruption. He adds to it in Ukraine. But the Biden family, through the bag man here, in this case, Hunter's the bag man, not James. The bag man gets $83,000 a month. His partner gets $83,000 a month, going into the same business, which Hunter has indicated to us over the years. Joe got 50% of whatever Hunter got, plus Hunter took care of all the expenses of the family. That's how the bag man got the bribe over to the ultimate, the Don, the top of the tree. What he got out of James for this, I don't know. What he got out of Hunter is listed is laid out in the hard drive as 50%. There was a similar deal with Russia involving Hunter with Irina Bukarina, who was a crooked oligarch, the wife of the crooked mayor of Moscow, crooked to this day, one of Putin's favorites, who gave him $3.2 billion in a deal still being unraveled that probably resulted in a lot more money. And within some period of time, I'll probably be able to come back to you with more money involved in that. But that went through Hunter, with the 50% going to alternatively described as the big guy or Pop. 10% for the big guy was a special deal with China we're going to discuss in a minute. The overall deal was 50% for Pop. And then we get to China, which is the big payday. China, they had been working on, as Miranda told you, from the mid 2010s. They got some money before the commitment of $1.5 billion, from the time of the commitment of $1.5 billion until the time he became president, based on the work of not only Miranda and my own people, other people, and Peter Schweikert's book. You can be safe in saying they got $31 million from Chinese communists, either through the Bank of China, through the company, which was a front company for the Chinese spies, acknowledged as such, and through other singular investments that were guided by the private equity fund in which the Chinese communists were partners, along with Whitey Bulger's nephew. So that would be the racketeering. That would be the racketeering case against him. There's no indication that Joe is involved in this. Now, this is not about Hunter's just one guy here. Trying to end this up with Hunter is like ending up the Gotti case with not even Sammy the Bull. This is the guy. This is what the millions are worth. Millions are worth his influence. The millions are worth not having the status of forces agreement so Iraq can do anything it wants. The millions are worth saving Burisma for Zlochevsky, who saved 10, 12 billion as a result of it. It surely was worth 14 million in bribes. My goodness, he paid 100 million to the president of the Ukraine. Bukarina, we don't know yet exactly what the 3.2 million was from Russia. But we do know it wasn't for a good cause and it wasn't for Hunter, right? Because we're smart. And China makes it clear in the documents it's all for Joe. And what did they get back from Joe? Ultimately, the big question that we have to be concerned about is beyond are they going to be criminally prosecuted, which is important, but even more important about that, what are we going to do about the national security of the United States? I'll be back in a moment with a conclusion on that. And it'll be very brief. And I think you're going to see how this is of more importance than even the criminal cases. We'll be back in a minute. I accomplished a lot in 2020, exposing the truth, establishing the relationship with you, working tirelessly for America. And I came to know the work and value of the people at American Hartford Gold. You see, you buy gold not only for what you know, but you buy gold for what you don't know. American Hartford Gold is the company you can trust when it comes to buying gold. They sell physical gold and silver delivered right to your door or inside of your IRA. In the precious metals industry, they are the highest rated firm in our country with an A+ from the Better Business Bureau and thousands of satisfied clients. Give them a call and tell them Rudy sent you. And be sure to ask them what I bought. And if you call them right now, they will give you up to $1,500 of free silver on your first order. Folks, these are uncertain times. The one thing you can count on to protect what you have worked so hard for is physical gold and silver. So don't wait. Call them now. Call 833-GOLD-777. That's 833-GOLD-777. Or text Rudy to 65532. Again, that's 833-GOLD-777. Or text Rudy to 65532. Welcome back. You know, before we get back to what we were talking about, I have something very apropos to talk to you about protecting our rights and protecting our freedoms and protecting our way of life, because the Chinese infiltration of this country is exactly what's put in jeopardy of trying to make us into a one world socialist economy and society, and a godless one at that. With the recent rulings of the Supreme Court, it's worth mentioning that that big win that'll save many, many lives didn't happen just many, many people contributed to. And one of them was Patriot Mobile, who have passionately fought on behalf of the things that we believe in: free speech, freedom of religion, freedom of conscience, protection of the unborn, the ability to defend ourselves, the belief that our rights come from God, not from a dictator. Patriot Mobile is the only Christian conservative mobile phone service provider. And they have been on the front lines fighting for our values. And, you know, inflation's made it really hard on Americans. And Patriot Mobile, that's a company of the people, has plans that will help you depending on your economic status and the issues that you may have. And then the money that you put in is going for the causes you believe in: the sanctity of life, the importance of free speech, the right of due process, the right to be safe from unreasonable searches and seizures, the ability to defend yourself in a situation where crime is rampant now. Go to patriotmobile.com/Rudy or call 972-PATRIOT. Use offer code Rudy to get free activation. Use offer code Rudy to get free activation. Got it right that time. See? If you're a veteran or first responder, please let them know, because they have very special discounts for you and you're entitled to it. Come join our movement and make the switch today. PatriotMobile.com/Rudy. PatriotMobile.com/Rudy or call 972-PATRIOT. So I want to conclude this because there's going to be much more that we're going to have to get into on this, unfortunately, over the year. It is no doubt that the President of the United States is compromised. On one side of the ledger, we have the Biden crime family and all the money they got, and we know what the Iraqis got for their money, what the Ukrainians got for their money. We don't know yet completely what the Russians got for theirs. But let me tell you a couple of the things that had we didn't have this evidence, it might raise the concern that somebody had bribed the president. The one that always jumps out at me is closing the Bagram Air Base, recently remodeled to the tune of billions and billions of dollars, leaving behind $85 billion in armaments for terrorists to use. But most importantly, leaving behind a modern, functioning, well-equipped air base 400 miles from China, 600 miles from Iran, but 400 miles from China. For the defense of the United States, you can't dream of a better position to be in. Just think of the Iron Dome in Israel, and the problem is how close the Palestinians are. And although it works 90+% of the time, it's a heck of a time, and you hold your breath because you've got 5-10 minutes to react. Big difference in nuclear defense, having 5-10 minutes to react or having an ocean to react. You don't give away a base 400 miles from China unless there's something seriously wrong with you. He refuses to push an investigation of China for the spreading of COVID. Look, whether they did it on purpose or by accident, they sent Chinese people all around the world while they locked down China, knowing they were spreading Chinese virus, CCP virus, knowing it for a month to a month and a half. If it weren't for Donald Trump shutting it down and being attacked as being anti-Chinese by the guy bought by China, Joe Biden, another month of it would have gone on. Another 500,000 million dead. Biden already has more people dead under him than under Trump. But if he had been president, who knows how many would have died? When would he have shut down China? When China said it was all right. I mean, if you think of the concessions that have been made to China, it's quite amazing. We cut down a major intelligence investigation that we had going on, suspended it to rethink it, in which we had been successful in finding particularly professors who had infiltrated universities, stealing our intellectual property, our secrets, and to a very large extent, brainwashing our students. That's been suspended by the pro-Chinese Biden government. Although Russia has been sanctioned for the illegal war in Ukraine, which involves atrocities that are almost impossible to think of in this day and age, China hasn't been sanctioned in any way at all for their participation and encouragement of it. China is constantly flying over and threatening Taiwan and other places in the islands. There's been nothing done to stop that. When Nancy Pelosi announced she wanted to go to Taiwan, the Chinese agent in the White House made it clear that he didn't want her to go. They've done nothing on tariffs. He is acting like the $31 million would suggest he would be bought and paid for by China. That is a massive intelligence, security, national security problem. It's unthinkable that we haven't prosecuted these cases when the FBI has had some of this information for 2.5 years. When the U.S. attorney in the Southern District of New York, Berman, turned this information down and no one investigating him. He turned this investigation down 2.5 years ago. They've had this information for 2 years. And then it becomes just stronger and stronger and stronger, and they do less and less and less. Beyond the criminal side, what about the security of our country? Biden is acting like he's been bought by China, and he has been bought by China. And we're going to ignore that? Gosh, there's something seriously wrong, isn't there? And we're going to have to get to the bottom of it. Not to mention the fact that Dianne Feinstein had a Chinese infiltrator for 19 years with her. Swalwell had a Chinese mistress who was a spy. Hunter Biden had a prostitute who was a Chinese spy and lost a I think it was a Chinese spy, and lost a laptop to her, or might have been a Russian spy. There's so many different ones. And just how much information does Russia and China have? I mean, I have the computer and the hard drive, one of them. There are many, many more. How much more compromising information do they have on the Biden crime family and other Democrats who were close to them, or even some Republicans? The failure to investigate that is close to being treasonous. I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat. Imagine if this information existed about an American president during the Cold War with regard to Russia or China. Well, we've got something like a Cold War with China going on. They're building up militarily. They've got a bigger Navy than us already. They've told us they want to overtake us by 2048. And they bully the world. And we're doing the appeasement thing with them, aren't we? It'd be one thing if we were doing it just because of ideology. Some of them are. But when we're doing it because the president's been bribed, that's unthinkable. Please consider this in the enthusiasm and your participation in the 2022 elections, and get rid of these people so we can get to the bottom of it. Let's have a really strong, tough Republican Congress that can get to the bottom of this and root out Chinese infiltration of our government and bring to justice people who stole a lot of money. Well, thank you, Miranda, for participating. Thank you for all listening. Thank you to the sponsors. And we'll be back very shortly with another Rudy Giuliani Common Sense that'll tell you the things other people don't have the guts to tell you. God bless America.